quadrant side of the storm. So that's going to be ongoing throughout the day today. We actually have a tornado-warned storm. If we could zoom in. My apologies, we can't, around the Fort Pierce area, a tornado-warned storm. This is our future radar. We actually might see multiple landfalls of this hurricane as it scrapes the coastline. So there's Tampa, and this is 2 a.m. overnight on Monday, and we're expecting the worst part of that storm surge, unfortunately, to go into the Tampa Bay area. That's why folks are very concerned. And then towards Cedar Key, and then towards Tallahassee, and this is 11 a.m. on Monday, and then we'll see, the effects moving into Georgia, Alabama, up towards the Tennessee River Valley and into Kentucky. Storm surge, you've heard us talk about this, very vulnerable area, more vulnerable than the east coast of Florida. So in some cases, this could be a worst case scenario. 10 to 15 feet is going to inundate all of these little areas that are low-lying, below sea level in some cases. And the Tampa Bay area certainly could see upwards of 10 feet. And that's why they are so concerned, and there's evacuations ongoing. Radar estimated precipitation, Shep, 10 to 12, already a foot of rainfall in South Florida. We can expect upwards of a foot, maybe 15 inches of rain as the system moves in and continues to move northward. But the story here, and I know we've been focusing in on it, is the storm surge. And that is going to be potentially devastating for these low-lying areas. In some cases, they haven't seen a hurricane like this in 100 years. So folks have not ever seen.
लेना हो एंटरटेनमेंट का चस्का टीवी एंड वीडियो अप्लायंसेस की सूरत में, या बनाना हो जिंदगी को आसान और शानदार किचन एंड लॉन्ड्री अप्लायंसेस के साथ, और भरपूर नींद के मजे लीजिए।
It's 1 p.m. in South Florida, and this is Fox News Channel's continuing coverage approach of Hurricane Irma. These are live pictures in Miami. We've just gotten the 1 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center, and essentially no change. The path has remained exactly as we've been speaking about it for the past, I'd say, 3 hours, continuing northward motion. The storm still packs maximum sustained winds of 130 miles an hour. So Hurricane Irma is still, as of 1 o'clock Eastern time, a very powerful Category 4 hurricane. It first made landfall just after 9 o'clock this morning, so more than 4 hours ago, in one of the smaller keys, in the lower keys, and then has since continued to move north. It had been going north-northwest, but now the storm is headed due north at 9 miles an hour, which leaves southwest Florida in its target. The winds and rains have increased in Miami Beach. The storm surge is a real concern. And in southwest Florida, Naples is of particular concern for the National Hurricane Center, and our Steve Harrigan is live there now. Steve.
Hey, Shepard, they've warned western Collier County could get extreme wind of up to 115 miles an hour. We're not quite there yet, but we are starting to feel it. All morning long, we've had tropical storm force winds of under 74, but now it's starting to kick up. We are seeing small objects begin to fly around, branches of palm trees. The street signs are shaking. They're not snapping yet. I'm not seeing any debris from the roofs, but we're still hours out. This place is in a state of civil emergency right now. That means you're supposed to stay inside your house. That's exactly what people have been doing. More than 20,000 people in shelters. A lot of them had a tough time getting there, but they are in there now and watching this as it comes in waves, sometimes pretty intense here. Naples could really get whacked here, both by the wind of up to 130 and then by a storm surge. Maybe the worst spot for that storm surge, which will follow the eye, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. So it could be parts of places where I'm standing now could be underwater by tomorrow morning, and we could see real structural damage to these trees if this wind force keeps up. I'm a little surprised it's getting this strong this early, but I guess it's coming this way, Shepard. Now, a key thing is going to be after this storm passes through for rescue and recovery efforts, and I-75 is going to be critical to that effort. They're staging much of the stuff in Orlando right now. Medical teams, fuel teams, and first responders might be coming out of Orlando, so we could see some real heroism overnight and in the next 24 hours, Shepard.
The degrading of conditions, Steve, how long ago would you say that started?
15 minutes ago. This was, just fine to stand here now. Next hit, I'm going to go put my goggles on because it's picked up right after that warning. So officials here have been on top of things. Their websites, their sheriffs have been going door to door. They've really been doing everything they can. And this county is really not built for this kind of a storm. All government buildings in the Naples area can only withstand a Category 3 hurricane. So you might have the situation here where first responders in the emergency situation room are actually evacuating themselves in the peak of this storm.
Oh,
the
man.
people who have to help people might need some help themselves.
Steve Harrigan, live with us in Naples. Naples in the crosshairs. Our senior meteorologist, Janice Dean, is live now for us in the Extreme Weather Center. Janice, if 3 or 4 days ago, you would have thought Miami. And now it looks like Marco Island in Naples.
You know, the National Hurricane Center has done a pretty good job with that cone of uncertainty because the cone did show the west side of Florida, but the center was showing a potential South Florida landfall. But I will say 50, 60 miles from the center offshore from what we were predicting is pretty good when it comes to predicting these hurricanes. They can be unpredictable. They can wobble east or west. You and I have been covering hurricanes for a long time, and it certainly has the potential to maybe go where we first thought it was going to go. But right now, we're pretty certain we're going to continue to see sort of a northward parallel track along the west coast. Naples right now, remember the tropical storm force winds extend 220 miles from the center of this storm. Hurricane force winds extend 80 miles from the center of this storm. So I'm not surprised that Steve Harrigan is seeing or feeling at least tropical storm force winds. There's Naples right there. There's the center of the storm. A little bit of a wobble here towards the northwest. We're going to have to watch those advisories as they come in. The next one at 2 p.m. Complete advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Naples right now, 76 miles per hour. We're not getting a lot of reports, obviously, from Miami and Marathon and Key West, not reporting at all any winds at the time, for the time being, and maybe for the next week or so. We'll have to see. Hurricane warnings for 18 million people all up and down the Florida coastline. Towards Georgia, we have a hurricane warning up towards Valdosta, Albany, Georgia. And then we have, for the first time in history, a tropical storm warning for Atlanta, Georgia. So that's historic for them. They remember Hurricane Opal that brought devastating floods and winds. This could be very similar for the folks in Georgia. Now, our wind field, as I mentioned, 80 miles away from the center of the storm. That's where we're feeling the hurricane force wind gusts. 220 miles from the center of the storm, tropical storm force winds. So we are definitely going to feel a hurricane for much of the peninsula of Florida and even into Georgia, which is quite unheard of at this time. Tornado threat, I know Rick was talking about this earlier today. We're going to continue to see the tornado threat on the northeast quadrant side of the storm. So that's going to be ongoing throughout the day today. We actually have a tornado warned storm. If we could zoom in. My apologies, we can't, around the Fort Pierce area, a tornado warned storm. This is our future radar. We actually might see multiple landfalls of this hurricane as it scrapes the coastline. So there's Tampa, and this is 2 a.m. overnight on Monday, and we're expecting the worst part of that storm surge, unfortunately, to go into the Tampa Bay area. That's why folks are very concerned. And then towards Cedar Key, and then towards Tallahassee, and this is 11 a.m. on Monday, and then we'll see, the effects moving into Georgia, Alabama, up towards the Tennessee River Valley and into Kentucky. Storm surge, you've heard us talk about this, very vulnerable area, more vulnerable than the east coast of Florida. So in some cases, this could be a worst case scenario. 10 to 15 feet is going to inundate all of these little areas that are low-lying, below sea level in some cases. And the Tampa Bay area certainly could see upwards of 10 feet. And that's why they are so concerned, and there's evacuations ongoing. Radar estimated precipitation, Shep, 10 to 12, already a foot of rainfall in South Florida. We can expect upwards of a foot, maybe 15 inches of rain as the system moves in and continues to move northward. But the story here, and I know we've been focusing in on it, is the storm surge, and that is going to be potentially devastating for these low-lying areas. In some cases, they haven't seen a hurricane like this in 100 years, so folks have not ever seen something like this. We do have a trough that's influencing this hurricane, and that was well predicted. We're going to start to see this weaken a little bit. That doesn't take the punch out of the potential storm surge along the coast. But certainly you can see the trough and some of that drier air working in. I don't think we're going to see this storm strengthen anymore, which is great news. But potentially where it goes, if it remains a little bit more offshore, Shepard, then I'm concerned about the worst side of that storm, the northeast quadrant, going into all of these areas. So this is the latest track, and we will get a new track at 2 p.m. But right now, I mean, it's the worst case scenario for all up and down the west coast of Florida. Back to you.
Janice, it's either going to come inland here in the next few hours or it's going to skirt that coast. And if it stays over water, it's just hard to imagine what that whole coast from southwest Florida up through Tampa is going to look like.
Absolutely. A difference between 30 and 50 miles offshore is really going to be the difference between a worst case scenario and a not so bad scenario. So at this point in time, we are expecting the center of the storm to remain a little bit offshore, but truly all of these areas just can't take the water, that pileup of water that's going into all of these low-lying zones that can be completely covered in water.
Dr. Mark DeMaria from the Hurricane Center talking about that on WSVN 7 in South Florida now. Let's listen.
For all that water to recede. Is that correct?
Our connection isn't great, so let's go to Adam Housley, who's live in Key Largo now. Adam, how's it looking?
Well, Shepard, we wait for those winds to switch, and you and I have been talking about it for several hours. We're starting to see it, or at least we believe it's what's happening, because the wind gusts will still come from this way, but I'm watching the trees over there start to blow this way, and these trees are starting to swirl, which we hadn't seen. They've been blowing in that direction the entire time, so we got to believe it means the winds are finally starting to switch from the other direction. I did get a chance to go out and shoot some video as well. You know, you had a guest on earlier talking about the water going out of Tampa Bay, being drawn out by this storm. We had it drawn out here. It's been out now for a couple of hours. It's still out. We expect that water to come back with a vengeance. That water being taken out by Hurricane Irma. We pushed back in as it swirls. Look at the video. The bay is empty. It even got more empty after this video. It was very eerie to look out, and for maybe even a quarter mile at the height, to see no water. It was as if a tide took everything away. Now we're told by our weather folks, I talked to Rick Reichmuth and Janice Dean, both tell us that it's going to come back almost like a tsunami. Not as fast as a tsunami, but a tsunami draws water out and then pushes it back. Same idea. This storm drew the water out. It's going to push it back now on the bay side here in Key Largo. The question is, it's coming in at a higher tide, and how much water will come into this area below me? We just don't know. We do know there's been flooding on the other side of the island, also in Isla Mirada, which is only about 5 miles from us. We were there yesterday. One of the viewers that we've become friends with who stayed here in a Cat 5 rated building sent us a photo of a home that's under like 3 or 4 feet of water in that direction over towards the ocean side, which we knew the water there, Shepard, had come up last night at about midnight. As you can tell, we're still getting wind from the east, so it still hasn't switched. But the wind gusts will come from here, and then all of a sudden we'll get one from a different angle. So that leads us to believe that this thing is finally starting to get past us at some point. Remember, we had hurricane-force winds here at 11 o'clock last night, and we've had winds consistently at 30 miles an hour or more since 10 a.m. yesterday morning. This area continues to get battered, Shepard, by this storm. I know Steve Harrigan, my colleague, is about 170 miles as the crow flies from me, just a bit more west, a bit more west than we are, almost north and just a little bit. He's starting to get the stuff that we felt yesterday, and this stuff that we've been dealing with the last few hours is now coming his way and to the people of that part of Florida, Shepard.
Adam, have you said that you're starting to notice the wind shifting. Have you noticed any change in speed?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know if it's because the way the angle is, Shepard. We'll get a gust like right now that comes through. It's pretty powerful. Not as bad as it was an hour ago when I was with you. And then all of a sudden you'll be able to stand like there's no wind at all. It's a little breeze, and all of a sudden you'll get one from a different angle. So we're getting the same gust, but you can start telling them they're coming. And look at these things here. These palm trees were blowing this way for the last 3 or 4 hours. Now they're kind of swirling, Shepard. You see how they're swirling? And in this direction, I don't know if we can show over here. Lloyd, can we show Shepard over here this direction? So these are now blowing almost south to north, Shepard. look at, if you see the palm trees out there in the distance, they're almost, the wind's coming from the south over there by the interstate. That's the interstate over there, maybe 100 yards from us. We're still kind of getting it from east to west. So this is a different looking wind and gusts that we've seen in a number of hours, Shepard.
Adam Housley in the Upper Key. Keep in mind, a lot of these pictures are very dramatic, but none of the areas where we've been taking you live were hit by the eye wall of this storm. The eye wall went over a lower key in the Florida Keys and has been over open water ever since. So other areas, it's not pleasant, and certainly lots of damage is being done. There's storm surge coming in, but we haven't gone to an area where the eye wall has actually hit. We believe that the eye itself is still about 22 to 26 miles wide. So a swath that wide will eventually be hit by this eye wall, and it'll be interesting to see how things hold up. 130 miles an hour at the strongest point is a lot of force to take. And it's possible that that storm stays right offshore and skirts up the southwest Florida coast. That would be a horrible situation for everyone, because the storm would remain strong with the water that feeds that storm as it rides up the coast. Or, and it appears this is what the National Hurricane Center is leaning toward now, if it continues to go due north, this will become a Marco Island, Naples storm, Everglades City, with that eye coming right over that heavily populated area, then going north, presumably just to the east of Fort Myers and Cape Coral, and then continuing up the peninsula, so just to the east of Tampa. What would that mean? That would mean that would mean Fort Myers and Cape Coral and up into Sarasota and Bradenton, up into Tampa and St. Petersburg. All of that, if this northern motion continues, would be to the west of the eye of the storm. That would be really good for those major population centers once you get up there, because, as we've been saying forever, the east side of the storm, east side of the eye, has the strongest winds. The northeast quadrant is where the worst of it all is. So that's one possibility. The other is that the storm stays right offshore, and that's really what the models have been suggesting, that it'll ride up that southwest Florida coast while in the water and just pummeling all of those same areas I just mentioned. When will we know which it's going to do? We will know it when it does it, and not until. This due north track, when we first saw it about 3 hours ago, the storm first started tracking due north instead of going north-northwest. And when we looked at it, our meteorology office said, we think that's just a bobble. That's not that the storm is headed due north. It's just at this point, when they're taking this reading, it shows north. Well, now we've had 3 reporting hours in a row of the storm headed due north. And if that is the case, Marco Island, Naples, Everglades City, Irma is on the way. Brigadier General Glenn Hagler is on the phone with us. He's the Vice Director for Domestic Operations at the National Guard Bureau. Sir, it's nice to speak with you. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me. How can I help?
I hear a lot of people are deployment ready.
Absolutely. So we've readied about 30,000 troops for Harvey, and we're drawing from that pool to reinforce Florida.
And tell me what that would mean.
So that means that we're metering in troops to the tune of up to 8,000 based upon Florida's request, maybe even to 10,000, and all different kinds of specialties that they need in order to reinforce their efforts throughout the state.
And specifically, I guess different guardsmen have different skill sets, but I guess they'd be all across the relief and recovery effort.
All across, absolutely. We're supporting local officials with anything they may need. We're bringing specific things like transportation, engineers, military, police, aviation, search and rescue, and infantry and command and control capability. And
how soon would they be able to get in there and get to work if necessary?
So we have soldiers on the move already. You should see between 500 and 700 flying into southeast Florida tomorrow as weather permits. We have troops on the highway coming from South Carolina, and we'll continue to reinforce and build those numbers as Florida directs.
The logistics of these storms, it just seems like a monumental task, especially given that you don't know exactly where the storm goes until it gets there.
Right, absolutely. That's why we plan, we exercise, we stress those plans to failure, we identify the gaps when we replan. So We're continuously working to get there as quickly as we can with the need and the capability that's needed.
Are we still working off the lessons learned from Andrew 25 years ago and then from Charlie and Wilma in the last decade?
Absolutely. These are all cumulative lessons learned, and we build upon each of those experiences. But I have to tell you, if you've seen one hurricane, you've seen one hurricane.
Yeah.
The important thing is that all this damage is going to be local to somebody, and we're going to be there to support the local civil authorities as they address those damages.
Brigadier General Glenn Hagler, Vice Director for Domestic Operations at the National Guard Bureau. It's great to see you. Thanks to the men and women of the Guard. We appreciate you.
We're proud to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Some pictures coming in now from WSVN 7. A live look with some video right along the shore. It's still really kicking up in southeast Florida. Listen.
At least a couple of feet. You walk over here this way. The wind has just been relentless out here in this area. Take a look, those sailboats over there, easily pushed up against the shore and rocking back and forth at an angle. Now, I kind of want to point out this one boat over here. You can see it is just taking on wave after wave. I mean, that is a very bad situation for whoever owns that boat, really for whoever owns a lot of these boats out here in the water. But that is the situation here on Watson Island as we continue to monitor this rising water and this heavy, heavy rain and wind.
Watson Island down in South Florida, WSVN 7 with those live pictures for us. I was going to try to give you an idea kind of where Watson Island is. If you're familiar with the MacArthur Parkway, the MacArthur Parkway connects Miami to Miami Beach on the lower end, so below the Venetian Islands and north of Dodge Island. At any rate, Watson is right there, and they are taking a pounding. What's next for this storm? It is northbound, and in 40 minutes, we'll get a brand new and comprehensive update from the National Hurricane Center in Miami. And it's that 2 o'clock update which may let us know, is this storm going to stay out over the Gulf of Mexico and pound the southwest Florida shore all the way up to Tampa? Or is this storm actually going to go in at Marco Island and Naples and become, for the history book, the second landfall of this storm? First the Keys, then Marco Island, Naples. That National Hurricane Center update may help us 2 o'clock Eastern time. Until then, our coverage continues next. And the power is out for more than 1.2 million people across the state of Florida, and the Florida Keys has just issued a warning. In an abundance of caution, they've asked all residents of the Keys, everyone using water in the Keys, boil your water. They are not 100% confident that the water supply is safe. That's why they have a boil water notification in. Phil Keating is live down in Miami for us, where the water had been rising for much of the day. How's it now, Phil? Well, he's wiping the water off his goggles. Phil Keating, can you hear me? How's it looking there?
Hey, just when you thought Miami might be almost out of it, not the case. We just got a new strong band coming in, blowing down 79th Street Causeway, which is a major artery east to west here in Miami. Takes you all the way over to Miami Beach. And not only just here, but where we were earlier, flooding in the water. Granted, a lot of it is because, number one, Hurricane Irma, storm surge coming in from the east with the counterclockwise wraparound wind bands, but also it coincided with 12:30 in the afternoon's high tide. I've driven this a long time. It's my normal route to work. Don't see it ever flooding like this. Only a few bold drivers out today. It's certainly not to be recommended. No law enforcement wants these people on the road. In fact, Emergency Operations Center managers basically advising everybody, stay in your house today. Don't leave. There are no first responders to help you out. When the winds pick up, the street lamp signs, street lights, they're all bouncing around. The billboards are bouncing around, flapping around. It's chaotic, really. I've only seen a smattering of people outside today, and for good reason. It's miserable. We've been doing this raining and windy for about 16, 17, 18 hours now, and we still have at least 10 hours to go based on the satellite loop of the hurricane. We're still getting northeast to southwest wind and rain, meaning the storm hasn't latitudinally passed us up to the north. So it's going to be another long day. WSVN 7 News, our Fox affiliate here, was just doing a drive down Alton Road by Mount Sinai Medical Center. Same situation. Standing water on the roadways, and this was something that all the city leaders, both the city proper and the city of Miami Beach, warned about, was that this had the potential for 3 to 6 feet of storm surge. Could be really bad if it happened at high tide. It hasn't been 6 feet from what we've seen, but it still certainly has been significant. I've lost IFB, Chef, so I'm just going to toss it back to you.
Fair enough. Phil Keating in Miami. That's on the southeast coast of Florida. Let's go to the southwest coast now. Griff Jenkins in Naples. How are things shaping up there, Griff?
Shep, it's still picking up. As you reported, the National Weather Service has got that 115-mile-an-hour wind off of Everglades City, south of here, on its way. The eye wall, hours away. It's still picking up. Let me just get out of the way and let our viewers look. We're about a block off of the beach. You can see the wind just whipping in what is a boat channel. Around the bend there are several boats that are blowing. Far too dangerous to get over there, but we wanted to give you a shot of that wind because, as we've talked all morning long, that wind is actually now traveling south, almost parallel to the beach, but the water, we just had a look with it, is still going out a little bit. The storm surge has not even begun to think about coming back as the eye wall approaches, and when it does, that's the real danger here. You see the roof starting to really, the wind gusting off the top of there gives us sort of a great perspective of just how powerful these winds are. We heard the last report for the National Weather Service Miami radar saying that it was sustained winds of almost 50 miles an hour and gust constantly at about 78 miles an hour. But once that 115-mile-an-hour winds gets here, and that shouldn't be too far off, it's going to change this dynamic dramatically. The roads, as we tried to show you in that last shot, becoming almost impassable because of so much of the trees and debris blowing down. But just that shot over there across that parking lot, beyond that, that apartment complex you're looking at literally is all oceanfront property, and we are just getting whipped here. It's quite strong, Shep.
Griff Jenkins there. Our colleagues at 7 News in South Florida are also in Naples. Let's take a live look.
They normally see here and on the beach is rushing out, being sucked out by Irma, and they're afraid of when it comes right back. In fact, they were showing some images earlier of Sanibel, areas that are normally covered with water that are actually fairly dry. This was a couple of hours ago. They said it was unprecedented for folks who come here a lot, folks who live here. This is something they don't normally see. And so right now, that's what they're fearing, is all that water that sucks out comes right back in here. This neighborhood, look at that wind tunnel you can see right there. For those of us who might be listening on the radio, I am in a parking garage looking at the back end of some buildings on 5th Avenue in Naples, very similar to Las Olas. So you're talking about a street like that. Looking in between two buildings, you can see just the wind and the rain rushing through in between those two buildings. The buildings right now are faring just fine. It's a lot of this debris, a lot of palm trees, and then they're worried about when all of that water comes sucking right back out of the Gulf of Mexico and then rushes up into the street. And the other thing I should mention about this street...
And we'll go back for more of that as the storm approaches. Generally speaking, the Hurricane Irma now headed towards southwest Florida, Naples, Marco Island, Fort Myers area. Marco's first. Stay with us.
Your brain changes as you get older, but
King at FEMA headquarters. Let's listen.
The President has directed the full resources of the federal government to be brought to bear to support the efforts of Governor Scott and state and local officials across Florida, and we will continue to do that. It's important to remember this is and continues to be a very dangerous storm, and we urge everyone within the sound of our voice to heed the warnings of local officials, whether that be to shelter in place or if in the farthest northern parts of the state there's still an opportunity, according to local officials, to move out of the way and to evacuate to a safe shelter. The people need to take this storm with great seriousness. It is a storm of historic and epic proportions, and the efforts of every level of our federal government are here to stand alongside the state and local officials in the life-saving mission, and very soon in the recovery mission, and very soon in the rebuilding mission. But President Trump, who spoke to Governor Scott this morning, he spoke to governors in neighboring states and said two very simple messages. Number one, we are with you. The prayers of the American people are with the people of Florida. And secondly, as the President said, our mission here at the federal level in support of local efforts is very simple. Wherever Hurricane Irma goes, we'll be there first. We'll be there with resources and support, both to save lives and to help to recover and rebuild these states and these communities.
The track has changed.
That's our pledge.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
This is a very dangerous storm. This is a life-threatening storm, and it's enormously important that every American in the path of this storm take the warnings of state and local officials to heart. We can rebuild cities. We can rebuild buildings. We cannot rebuild lives. And saving lives is the priority of all of us, from the President to Governor Scott on down. And we'll stay focused on the life-saving mission. But it all begins with Americans in harm's way, listening to state and local officials, whether that be to shelter in place, or if local officials say there is still time to evacuate to a safe shelter, to do that. But to heed those warnings, to act on those warnings, put your safety, your family's safety, and the safety of those vulnerable citizens that you know around you first. And we'll get through this.
Vice President Pence,
thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
What aspect of this storm really concerns
At FEMA headquarters, maybe he's taking some questions here. Let's listen.
Clearly the briefing that we received at Camp David this morning caused the President to have great concern for the impact of this storm moving up the West Coast and the potential through heavy winds and storm surge to compromise cities and compromise lives. And that's why we need to take this seriously. We've all seen the experts speak about that topmost part of the storm that will be striking, it appears, potentially the west coast of Florida as Hurricane Irma moves north. People that are in harm's way in just a few hours in Marco Island, in Naples, in Sanibel, in Captiva, and then north to Tampa, need to take these warnings seriously. And we know that every American is, and know that every resource of the federal government is being brought to bear to support state and local efforts. And from all that I've heard, and all the President's heard, I think the American people can be proud of the efforts that are underway. But we need to remain vigilant. People need to take the warnings seriously, and the people of Florida need to know that our hearts and our prayers and all of our efforts are with them and will be with them until this storm passes.
Mr. Vice President, thanks everybody. Thanks.
The Vice President, excuse me, live at FEMA headquarters in Washington, and a bit of a rescue, it appears, taking place here. It looks like that one car couldn't make it happen anymore, and the van is there to help. But this sort of thing going on in lots of places. And the Vice President mentioned Marco Island and Naples. Now this storm appears to be headed in that direction. We'll ask Steve Harrigan about that. It sure looks like it. Steve?
Shepard, it is coming right down this road here in Naples. The rain coming in sheets and the wind sometimes kicking up into definitely hurricane force winds. The timing of this is going to be critical. We could see the worst of the wind in about 2.5 hours time. And keep in mind, high tide here is at 3:55 p.m. So we could have the worst of the wind and the highest of the tide just at the wrong time. They've been aggressively trying to get people out of this city of 20,000. They've done an excellent job with that. The sheriffs have been going door to door. But right now, a civil emergency is in place. People are being told to shelter in their homes, and that's exactly what people are doing here. There's no one out except for some journalists to watch this. As far as structural damage from 115-mile-an-hour winds, we have not seen that yet, so I think that is still to come. We're seeing small branches and signs, but no roofs and no trees yet. But that could be in the next few hours, Shepard.
Steve Harrigan live with us. We'll get back to him as conditions deteriorate. If we want to look at WSVN 7, the local radar shows where the eye of this storm is now. Phil Farrow there, the meteorologist. And if we drop the banner just for a second, our viewers will be able to see that eye is fast approaching Marco Island in Naples. Listen.
Some big rattling going on up high above us, and we're hoping that the roof will hold with all these gusty winds. As soon as we get more information, we'll pass it along to you.
He's talking about the roof there at WSVN 7. Remember, they're right on the water on the North Bay Causeway, 79th Street, where the wind is howling and the water's coming up in their parking lot. And our hope is they don't get flooded out, because we know and love so many of them, and certainly because, well, we need their facilities too. We couldn't thank them enough. Ed Anson and all the team at WSVN 7, Alice Jacobs, the manager in charge around there, and Craig and Belkis and the whole team. It's just, we couldn't do it without 7 News in South Florida. What a service they provide to the residents of South Florida. So proud to have them on our affiliate team. Tara Bazinski is with us. She's riding out the storm in Coral Springs in South Florida. How you doing, Tara?
We're doing well. We lost power around 10:15.
This morning?
10:15 this morning. So I have my brother's family. He's a first responder. So we have them here because he's working, and our family. So it's 3 adults, 2 kids, and 2 infants, and 2 dogs.
Well, our thanks to your brother, first off, for his first responder service. How are the kids and the pets doing?
Pets are doing fine, a little nervous. They haven't been out since last night, so that's going to be interesting. And
messy,
the kids,
messy.
Of course, exactly. The kids, of course, are building forts. We're playing board games. And the 2 babies, they, of course, have no idea what's going on. So we're trying to keep the kids busy. They keep asking to turn on the TV, and we're explaining to them it's going to be a day of checkers and chess and Uno.
Well, a little family bonding. You know, one of the things that we, growing up in hurricane land and having been to so many of them, the feel that your kids get from the parents is really important, because if you are happy and smiling and such, then they won't be too nervous and stressed out. It seems to be a pretty high priority for parents.
Exactly. I remember growing up during Hurricane Andrew. I've lived in Coral Springs my whole life, and for us it was fun, Hurricane Andrew, because it was lights out, and our parents made very light of it, so we didn't get worried. So we're trying to do the same for our kids.
How bad's it been? You haven't been out, have you? And I'm not asking you to do so. You shouldn't.
Of course not, but we keep seeing neighbors walking in the streets, which is scaring me. We have impact windows, so we can see out throughout our whole entire house. We didn't have to board up, which was very nice. So we can see out. The neighbors' trees, lots of limbs have fallen. We have a patio enclosure for our pool, and that's kind of blown off all the screening. So we're watching it. We can see it out through all of our windows. But no, I would not recommend anyone walking in, because it picks up the gusts really bad.
No way. Tara Bazinski is riding out the storm down in Coral Springs, Florida. Good luck to you and the family and the pets and everybody.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
We just got a directive from Monroe County, which is the Florida Keys. And I'm sad to read this. Monroe County, I'm quoting now, Monroe County News, Monroe County is closed until further notice. Evacuated residents do not return until further notice. More information to come. And you had to figure something like this was coming. With the Florida Keys, there's one way in and one way out. The overseas highway, US 1, if you've never driven it and you ever get a shot, you definitely should. It's one of the most spectacular looking things in all of America, and it's a wonderful drive from the Upper Keys down into Key West, and that whole area is closed now. I don't know. I don't have a way to know what's happened to the bridges and the overseas highway itself, and the iconic old businesses there, and marine fisheries, and all the wildlife that goes along with that part of South Florida, from the bay side to the ocean side. We don't have a way to know yet, but we know Cudjoe Key took a direct hit. It took a direct hit from a Category 4 hurricane. As the Vice President of the United States put it, a historic and epic hurricane, as the Vice President put it. And a Category 4 storm, a direct hit in a small town like that, it's not going to be pretty. And the hope is that the people of Monroe County and conks from from key to shining key will be able to get themselves back up and running as they always have. But this time they'll need all our help. And if you want to give, it's an easy Google. The Red Cross is a good place to go. The governor's office in Florida has been giving suggestions, but we're following this storm with rapid urgency as we go from reporter to reporter, and we see a slight little slice of what's happening. But in the big picture, a Category 4 storm barreling down on Marco Island and Naples and Estero and Bonita Springs and Fort Myers and Cape Coral and Sanibel and Captiva. It's a sobering thing. Tomorrow will be a new day and not a perfect one for so many. And you're all in our thoughts and prayers. Our coverage continues in a moment.
Maria.
Fox News Channel continuing coverage of Hurricane Irma and a live look in Naples, Florida as the hurricane heads in that general direction now. We have word that 1.8 million Florida Power customers are without electricity. I don't mean Florida Power and Light, the company, but people who are customers of power companies across Florida. 1.8 million customers are without power. Schools are closed in Miami-Dade County through Tuesday. Schools are closed in Broward County until further notice, according to the Broward school system. And Monroe County itself closed until further notice. For residents who have evacuated, you cannot go home, not now, not until further notice. Mark DeMaria is with us, acting deputy director of the National Hurricane Center live in Miami. Mark, is this northward track, I guess if that continues, southern southwest Collier County is it?
Yes, there's really no way they're going to escape at this point. Irma is closing in on the Naples area. It's less than 50 miles away, and the outer part of the eye wall is affecting that area as we speak.
The worst of it for, say, Marco Island, Everglades City, and then north up into Naples.
Yes, that's correct. Marco Island is a little peninsula here, and Naples is just to the north of that. And then it'll be continuing to spread up into the Sarasota area and then the Tampa area into tomorrow.
I wonder about Fort Myers and Cape Coral and the rest of that on the southwest coast. Do you have a sense yet? Is there anything to indicate that the northward movement would continue or that it might stay offshore?
At this point, it looks like the northward motion is to continue, possibly with a slight westward drift. But we feel like this is going to be just offshore or just onshore of that, really that whole area.
Motion is at about 9 miles an hour. I'm guessing something like that continues. Once it gets to Tampa, St. Pete, is it still dangerous?
Oh, yes. We expect this it'll be accelerating forward speed, and possibly the winds will be a little less strong. But we're expecting hurricane conditions in the Tampa area, storm surge of up to 5 to 8 feet, and extremely heavy rainfall. So this is going to be a serious threat to the Tampa area, no matter whether it crosses land or stays over the shore. And
so my understanding is some of the greatest flooding concerns are there in Hillsborough County, right around St. Pete and low-lying areas there.
Yes, that's correct. And it's going to be similar to what we saw on the east coast of Florida today, that the combination of storm surge and the heavy rainfall makes inland flooding more likely. The heavy rainfall near the coast doesn't have anywhere to go when you have the storm surge is elevated, and so it collects a lot more than it usually does, making the rainfall effect even worse when you have the combination of rainfall and surge.
Mark DeMaria from the National Hurricane Center. How are you guys holding up down there, Mark?
Well, it's a bit of a marathon, but we're holding up.
Well, we appreciate it so very much. Keeping us informed saves lives. Mark DeMaria and all the folks at the National Hurricane Center, thank you again. So landfall is coming again. There was landfall this morning just after 9 o'clock in the lower Keys, and now there's another landfall on the way. Where will it be? Well, no one is certain of that, but it looks like Marco Island, Everglades City, and then up into Naples somewhere. Will this be the storm that hit Marco Island? We will know soon enough. Moving north at 9 miles an hour with maximum sustained winds of 130 miles an hour. A massive Category 4 storm bearing down on southwest Florida. A live look now, Key Largo, Florida, where for 24 hours they've been getting battered by this storm. A storm that's now headed north toward the Collier County area in southwest Florida. The state of Georgia has just issued a state of emergency for all 159 counties in the Peach State. That's unheard of. an expanded state of emergency for all 159 counties in the state of Georgia. In addition, we've gotten word from the National Hurricane Center. We are exactly 5 minutes away from the 2 p.m. update, which will give us brand new coordinates and a brand new track and a brand new refreshed idea of where they believe this storm is going to go. Eventually, we head toward Orlando, where they have a tornado watch now as the storm continues to progress north. And our Bill Hemmer is standing by live there now. Bill?
Hey, Shepard, good afternoon again. We're going to watch this storm go north, whether it's Orlando and then Jacksonville, and as you point out, into the state of Georgia. Before that, Tallahassee will be in the target range as well. We are far enough north to know that we would have been pretty much out of the heavy stuff until right about now, where the rain bands are starting to kick in, a little bit of wind, but nothing like our other colleagues have experienced so far in South Florida. A tornado watch for the moment. An hour ago was a tornado warning because there was one spot to the southeast off the Atlantic shore. We'll see, though, how that weather changes throughout the night, given the deteriorating situation that we have seen locally here. 2 deaths to report related to Irma already. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, here in Florida, telling us 2 hours ago, 2 police officers finishing their shifts overnight last night in separate cars, head-on collision as they were heading home to family. One of them, one to begin their shift, the other a head-on collision, taking the lives of both officers here in Florida. And certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to those families already now suffering a great deal throughout the state of Florida. The governor has issued a curfew. It will start in 5 hours here in Orlando. Everybody's going to be ordered off the streets. Not that there are that many people so far to stay here. But as you watch this storm move up the coast of Florida, Shepard, and you look at that map, right, and you try and figure out whether it shifts to the west a little bit or whether it stays on that track or whether it moves up the spine of Florida. Either way, here in Orlando, where so many people have sheltered from South Florida, they've come here to take refuge. The right side of that storm, those strong winds and those strong bands are going to be a big deal here around 7, 8 o'clock tonight and all night overnight. Adam Housley's been kicked in the teeth now for 12-plus hours. He may have 6 or 10 more hours to go down there. And that is part of what the rest of Florida is about to get here as that storm moves further north. Here in Orlando, back to you now in New York, Shepard.
Bill Hemmer, thanks very much. We're getting our first pictures out of Cuba. You know, this storm skirted the northern coast of Cuba for hours and hours, and now some pictures are in. Lillian has those.
Right. It hit on Friday night as a Category 5. This shows Havana, waves crashing into the seawall. Another look at Havana, flooding there. Authorities did a good job. They evacuated about 10,000 people from Havana. Another city on the northern coast. You can see the down power lines here. Family making their way through that area. This area had about 3 feet of 3 feet of storm surge hit, but they seem to be picking up and getting on with things.
Yep. Two sides of the storm. The right is the worst. The left is not as bad. Thankfully, at least Cuba was on the left side of that, and those mountains probably diminished the speed of the winds, at least for a short time. Remember, it was downgraded to a Category 3 for a while. It's now a Category 4, and we really don't have a lot of reports out of Varadero Beach there in Cuba or a number of other areas along that north coast, and we're waiting for those. There were great concerns that there might be a humanitarian disaster of sorts there because there's just no certainty about the safety of their shelters. In the past, the United States has offered help to Cuba after natural disasters of this kind. In the past, the Cuban government has, the Cuban dictator there has rejected those offers. But we'll see how much help Cuba needs. We'll have plenty of need for help here in the United States in the days and weeks and months to come. Florida Power and Light has just issued a statement saying that they believe by the time this thing is over with that 3.4 million Floridians, 3.4 million will be without power of customers. So it's many more people than that. And the 2 o'clock update from the National Hurricane Center is coming in just a moment, and I can tell you that we now have access to that, and the forward speed has increased and the wind speed of the storm has decreased. Hurricane Irma, as of 30 seconds ago, is now a very strong Category 3 storm with maximum sustained winds at 120 miles an hour. The central pressure is rising. It's up to 936 millibars. And also important, forward speed of the storm has gotten faster. It was moving at 9 miles an hour before, forward progress. Now it's moving due north at 12 miles an hour. 12 miles an hour, and Irma on the move. It's 2 o'clock in southwest Florida, and now it waits for Hurricane Irma to strike. I'm Shepard Smith in New York. This is Fox News Channel's continuing coverage of that storm. It had been heading in a northwestern direction for the early part of the morning, but about 4 hours ago shifted to due north, and that's where it's traveling now. That means most likely southwest Collier County, Marco Island will be impacted. Let's go for the live update now from the National Hurricane Center in Miami.
This is Mark DeMaria with the 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time update on Hurricane Irma from the National Hurricane Center. The latest on Irma is that the maximum winds are now 120 miles per hour. Still remains a Category 3 hurricane. At the present time, it's only about 30 miles south of the Naples, Florida area, moving north at about 12 miles per hour. So we can see here it's really closing in on the Naples, Marco Island region. As you can see here in the radar imagery, this very bright red area indicates the northern eye wall. So they should really be seeing the full effects of this hurricane over the next couple of hours. We're also seeing significant effects continuing in Miami-Dade County and Broward and spreading up into Palm Beach. In these outer rain bands, we continue to see gusts to hurricane strength in Miami-Dade County and Broward. At this point, Irma is at about the latitude of Miami. So in the next couple of hours, as this continues up the coast, we expect the winds to turn around a little bit more to the southwest, and we'll see the wind threat to those eastern counties to subside. There's long trailing rainfall, so the rainfall threat is going to continue along the east coast well into tonight, into tomorrow. The greatest hazard at this point is the storm surge. Again, with that system approaching the Naples area, we're still expecting 10 to 15 feet from the Captiva area down to the southern tip of Florida. And what we've seen so far, which is a bit ominous, is that we still have the offshore flow in Naples, and we've seen the ocean subside by about 4 feet from where it's supposed to be. But as soon as that system switches around to the other side, that ocean is to come roaring back up, and it's going to go to those 10 to 15 feet values. And this is all going to be happening within the next couple of hours. So this is going to play out, and this has the potential to be life-threatening, and people need to just stay where they are and be prepared for this in the next few hours. In the longer term, we have the forecast continuing to go up the west coast of Florida, again because of the large size of the system and what we're seeing in Miami-Dade and Broward counties. We have hurricane warnings up for essentially the entire state of Florida except the western panhandle. In terms of timing, the Tampa area, we're looking at still hurricane conditions, those to peak in the overnight hours, the early morning hours. We're also anticipating storm surge of 5 to 8 feet in the Tampa area, and there's also going to be a significant impact of rainfall. So the people in the Tampa-St. Pete area need to be prepared for all of the threats from a hurricane, the winds, the rainfall, and the storm surge. In the longer term, we'll see this continuing up into northern Florida in the Monday time frame, and then eventually reaching the Mississippi Valley by midweek. And at that point, it'll primarily be a rainfall threat. Again, we'll have to keep an eye on that. People in the southwest Florida area, again, be very prepared for life-threatening surge and wind in the next few hours, spreading up into the Tampa